where you are. Welcome to this conversation about design thinking, global standards, and integrative solutions for a net zero built environment. So my name is Maria Smith-Mordack, and I am Chief Executive of the UK Green Building Council. We are a membership organisation with over 700 built environment businesses and organisations working together to radically improve the sustainability of the built environment. Ooh, can you hear me all right? Sorry. So as many of us will have heard many times, this COP, the built environment, creates 37% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. So change within this sector, within this area, is absolutely critical to tackling climate change. Now, I want to thank the AIA, the RIBA, ASHRAE, AFPA, and EPD International for organising an event about design thinking. I've been here at COP for over a week now, and I've heard a huge amount about data, about regulation, enforcement, and finance. And all these things are extremely important, but as an architect, I also know that design thinking, by which I mean creative, collaborative, iterative, and artistic approaches, are also critical to us collectively imagining and bringing about a fair and sustainable future. Now, at the UK GBC, we use all sorts of design thinking formats for facilitating creative collaboration to build consensus around best practice and campaigning for systems change across industry and government. And as an architect, I also know that the cultures of design and cultural ideas around what makes good design, what we understand to be beautiful, whether that's a forest or a building, shift and change over time, and that to design and realize a built environment that is an active force for good in our complicated world, facing as it is the climate and biodiversity breakdown and social injustices that we have, we need to shift those ideas around what constitutes good design.
Like good design of microphones.
Should I hold it? Should I say it again? One moment.
Mic check.
Should I hold it? Okay. Can you hear me? I'm hearing an echo as well, which is a little bit. Oh. Okay. I'm going to carry on. One of my greatest pleasures here at COP isn't chairing prestigious events, though thank you so much for this opportunity, but it's been having conversations with other folks that I've met here who are passionate about climate justice that I might not meet in the course of my job at the UK Green Building Council or back in the UK. And I wanted to share something from a really fascinating conversation that I had the other day with a new friend. So he was telling me about the role of different sides of the brain. He was telling me about how the left side of the brain is... Hello. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So my new friend was telling me the other day about how we have the two different sides of our brain, and how the left side of our brain is brilliant at that focused work, at working precisely within an area we already understand, and that the right-hand side of the brain is brilliant at seeing the bigger picture, at thinking in systems and connecting the dots. And both sides of the brain are very, very important, but culturally, we're too often collectively dominated by left brain thinking. And design thinking is one of those fantastic opportunities gifted to us by right brain thinking. And here we can think expansively about new possibilities, about bringing together ideas and perspectives from across the world, from across industries. And this right brain thinking is what we need much, much more of in order to tackle the interconnected issues around climate, biodiversity, and inequity. So I want to welcome this panel, welcome all of you, both in the room and online, to engage your creative right brain hemispheres for this conversation. And I hope that together we can really sort of make some progress towards decarbonizing the built environment and also tackling all of those interconnected issues. I'm really glad that we've got a microphone that's working now. That's really brilliant. And thank you so much to all of the technical... Do you know what? We should have a round of applause for all of the technical teams here at COP. You're working so, so hard to make all of this possible. And that is a green job. Right. So I'm going to hand over now. We're going to hear from each of my esteemed panelists for 5 minutes each, and then we're going to have a conversation amongst ourselves and then also open it up to the floor for questions. So please be thinking about your questions as we go through. But first, I want to introduce Emily Granstaff-Wright, who is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. Here is the clicker, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Smith. Maybe I'll use the handheld. Yes. I'll try one more. No. Salutations. Good morning, good evening, all the above. My name is Emily Granstaff-Rice. I'm the president of the American Institute of Architects. It is a great honor to be here representing the AIA. When you all look at this panel, you should note that each of us represent a variety of disciplines, backgrounds, and expertise. And why is this important? Well, the simple fact about climate change is that there is nothing simple about climate change. There is no one single thing that we can do to achieve decarbonization. And even if a total shift to renewable energy were achievable, that would only get us partway there. Meeting greenhouse gas targets is crucial, but it's only one metric. Everything we do has ripple effects. In this broader view, climate action extends beyond energy to human and ecosystem health, to equity and climate, and importantly, adapting the inevitable climate changes that will happen no matter what we do now. So my message to you today is that architects have a unique and significant contribution to make. We operate in the building environment, a primary but sometimes unheralded contributor to climate change. As architects, we are uniquely trained to develop holistic solutions, bringing together disciplines, including those represented on this panel. So that's why I'm so excited to be here today. Our pledge to the health, safety, and welfare of people has already resulted in massive progress towards climate goals and resilience. And there is action that you in this room can take in your countries, regions, and cities to help us deliver even greater dividends for our planet's future. You likely know that the built environment contributes to about 40% of the annual global CO2 emissions, as Smith said earlier. Do you know that from 2020 to 2060, global building floor area is expected to double, growing by about 240 billion square meters. That's 2.6 trillion for my American challenged friends, square feet, excuse me. Imagine the difference if these new and retrofitted structures attained net zero. That would be amazing. So we architects have that vision, and we are leading the way through programs like the AIA's 2030 commitment. This effort to track reported operating energy and embodied carbon project data, has grown to 1,300 signatories. Since COP21 in 2015, AIA's 2030 commitment has delivered a reduction in CO2 emissions of 205 million metric tons. But we know that true net zero transcends energy alone. It requires holistic solutions. It calls for tackling complex and hard to define problems. This is where architects excel. So for example, let's consider the Harvard University Science and Engineering Complex, where I live in Boston. It combines passive heating, cooling, and ventilation, stormwater collection and reuse, reclaimed building materials, and a biodiverse landscape and greenway, all to achieve a 75% energy reduction in comparison to a typical laboratory building. This complex was designed in accordance with the AIA's Framework for Design Excellence. It challenges architects to apply design thinking to every project, every time, setting forth 10 principles, these are 5 of them on the screen, that align with the UN's 17 Sustainable Design Goals. And these are the other 5 to make up the 10. With the Framework for Design Excellence and other initiatives, architects are taking a leadership role on global standards. For example, the impact pillars that grew out of the AIA Materials Pledge have been expanded into a comprehensive common materials framework. It is now shared by major industry certifications and rating systems, including LEED, well, and living building challenge, many of which are represented here in this room today. So the power of the AIA materials pledge is particularly evident in the reuse of existing buildings, like the one you see here, which is a studio for an architecture firm in Portland, Oregon, in the Custom Blocks building, a renovation of an 80-year-old industrial building, highlighting the opportunity that we have in our existing building stock. So materials selection helped the studio project become Portland's first living building challenge certified structure, while reducing its vulnerability to heat waves, drought, and flooding. The project's embodied carbon is a little over 1/5 of the average for new construction. We often say the greenest building you have is often the one that already exists. So architects are leading, and we will continue to lead, but we also have a unique challenge for which we ask your help. Standards and codes that support sustainable design give us a much stronger position when we discuss lowest costs versus climate forward solutions. And it's not an either or, but sometimes it does become a debate with our clients. While those standards and codes are in place, we can confidently tell clients, your jurisdiction is committed to this and recognizes its importance. Give us standards and codes that support climate action. Wow, that was underlined in my notes too, so thank you for that. And we will make sure that it is the best solution and also becomes the right solution for every project architects undertake. Those trillions of square feet, billions of square meters are being designed, built, or renovated now. Architects are willing to work with you. Why are we waiting? Thank you.
I'll test my mic. Doesn't sound like it's on. Does it sound like it's on? Can everyone hear me? Yes. Excellent, great.
Well, I'm just going to take this opportunity to introduce Natasha from the Australian Forest Products Association. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you. And it is wonderful to be here today representing the Australian Forest Products Association. And I want to thank Smith for the introduction, and I also want to acknowledge my co-speakers. It is really through this active collaboration and dialogue, not only about the challenges but the opportunities, that we will ensure this collective action will actually, through countries, the private sector, investors and civil society as well, that we can actually work together to find those solutions for a net zero built environment. My introduction slide actually features a building in Australia, in Victoria. It's called the T3 Collingwood building. It's a 15-storey building in Australia. It's the first building that received specialist funding from Australia's Clean Energy Finance Corporation's $300 million timber building program. The T3 building, T3 buildings are called that because they're based on these three principal core ideas of timber, transit and technology. They strive to achieve a dual emissions reduction impact, cutting embodied carbon during the construction phase, and then as much as by 40%, and then also once operational, they're targeting net zero emissions. So, when we look at these hybrid construction approaches, this one in particular is using 10 floors of glue laminated timber structure and also then cross-laminated timber flooring, on top of 5 floors of reinforced concrete podium levels. The timber used in the building was sustainably sourced from 2 specialist timber Victorian manufacturers, and it's all Australian timber. We have Xlam Australia and the Australian Sustainable Hardwood Ash. It's a fantastic example of what can already be done, and it is being done by architects, society, industries as well, working together. But for many policymakers, it's really they really struggle to understand sustainable forestry, and so we really do play a really significant education campaign from the Australian Forest Products Association. So AFPA works across the whole supply chain of sustainable forest and forest products to shape and drive policies and to raise awareness about and the profile of the industry, and in particular to facilitate that education piece on issues that are relevant to sustainable forestry, sustainable growth of the sector. And a key, hang on. Okay. And a key issue that we're working on is that growing role of forest products and what they will play as far as climate mitigation goes. At COP27 last year, we launched with our international partners the report into the growing role of forest products in climate mitigation and the need for nationally determined forestry approaches to achieve net zero emissions. When we think about buildings, we also need, I think, to think about cities and the impact of cities. And we do see, researchers and policy makers are telling us that more people actually gravitate to cities as climate impacts, the world as we move forward. So I think when we think about forest products in today's society, they are already supporting livelihoods, human health, well-being, biodiversity, and they are already reducing emissions through sequestering carbon, providing oxygen, and also through that substitution and avoidance of higher emitting products. The World Bank tells us that it is predicted that wood and fibre product demand will quadruple by 2050 because of their low carbon properties. So as cities grow and housing demand increases, so will emissions, unless of course collectively we better understand what will be needed to meet the future timber supply gap. Because we really, when we think about if we are to move to this low carbon bioeconomy, we're going to need more timber. So Australia is working with, I'm just going to, hang on, just go to my next slide. Australia is working with decision makers and to educate them around the sustainable carbon cycles of forestry. And you can find these resources via the QR code on the screen. And they are really great resources to use to give you an overview of the sector. You can also see on the graphic on the screen that circular bioeconomy of the forest sector. That carbon cycle of forestry is not just in the forest, but also in that built environment, but also the other aspects of the sector that will be required to also provide, materials for bioenergy and what have you. So essentially, when we look at the discussions that are happening at this COP in particular, they've been wide-ranging about the uses of timber and forest residues. And we truly believe that they can play a backbone to the biocircular economy. And again, we've been hearing from various speakers, what the sector will need to provide from bioenergy to sustainable aviation fuel and even the greening construction. So as we look at what the countries are doing at the COPs, they will actually have what we describe as a moral imperative to know where will that future resource come from and what policies will be needed not only to grow sustainable forestry, but also to protect nature, biodiversity and our ecosystems as they are impacted by climate change. As fires, floods, winds all become more severe, they do impact our forests, and we do need to work on how to protect them, because if we are to get that resource from those forests, we will need to also ensure that we are protecting the forests as we move along. It's why AFPA has joined, hang on, let me just change my slide again. It's why AFPA is really quite excited that Australia has joined the Coalition on Greening Construction with Sustainable Wood. It will broaden that discussion back into the forest and, where will that sustainable timber come from? And I'm just going to end my talk back at the T3 building. I'm going to let the developers of this building just share with you a little bit how excited they are to be using a really fabulous product like the timber from Australia. Now, I was hoping there'd be sound with this. I'm not sure if anyone can help me. Should be sound to the video? Okay, maybe I'll... I'm not sure if the tech guys are going to help me here. Oh my Lord.
Do you want to talk over it a little?
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, so the builders really could have, the developers could have really spoken to this in far more detail than I could have, since I didn't take their notes down. But essentially, this is the first phase of them putting in the timber construction. So they're really excited. The timber is coming in, and what they found with using timber, it's prefabricated off-site. So what they found through why they can actually reduce the embodied carbon, but also the emissions associated with the construction phase, is because they need less people on site. The work is actually done prefabricated, as I said, off-site. It's brought in. It's a little bit like, I would describe it like Lego. They just put it together as the building is being developed, and it does go up quicker. And as each floor is being developed, they can actually start fitting in the building underneath, because it is a secure structure once it's built. So when we think about the benefits of timber, it is also about reducing not only I think I've got sound, and that's the end of the video. But as you can see, where the T3 building is, it's actually in the city, and it's a bit like what Emily was talking about. It's retrofitting an older it's retrofitting an existing building that had the concrete slab, and then building on top of that, which is really fantastic. And as you can see, it's in the heart of, it's very close to the city of Melbourne, but it is a really fantastic case study about what can be done. I should say that we do have other timber buildings in Australia, but this is the first one, again, where I started from, where the Clean Energy Finance Corporation in Australia has really chosen to invest in timber buildings, because they do see it as a really significant pathway forward to reduce carbon emissions in the built environment. I'll leave it there, unless, of course, I maybe could play it one more time, maybe. Oh, no, hang on, let me go back one more minute. No, hang on, let me go back one. All right, here we go.
We're at 36 Wellington Street in Collingwood. Today is the first day of our timber installation for the project. So as you can see behind me, we have our glue lamp columns getting installed, which is a big milestone for the project.
All our columns and beams are GLT, so they're all Vic Ash hardwood timber from Hayfield, coming from Ash's facility. So it's an exciting time. Our base plates are in. They're putting in the props for the columns now and standing them up.
Yeah, so the columns and beams will all be exposed with the finished product, and the idea being that all we really should need to do is touch up. So there'll be a bit of sanding and sealing, but apart from that, once we're done, we walk away and it's a finished timber.
So each level has 42 columns and 51 beams. There's 65 floor plates, so CLT floor plates per level.
Working with a product like this is exciting because we do see it as a way of the future. It is going to be a new material that we really hope that the industry sees as a viable option for superstructures moving forward, especially if we're really serious about these net zero carbon emission targets that we have globally set for ourselves.
Thank you.
This one now. Okay, cool. All right, thank you, Natasha. So we've heard from Emily on the ways in which architects really can excel, and the architect's skill set can excel at helping us solve problems. And we've heard from Natasha about the role of forests and beautiful timber structures, and thank you for the video, and I'm really glad that worked. It's incredible to see those projects come together. Now, Dr. Nasser Ayub from EPD International is going to now tell us about the roles of environmental product declarations in this story. So, Nasser.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me now? Okay. So first, I would like to say hello to everyone in online. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you all for here in this room. Actually, when I started to, I thought what I should start with, why I'm here for two reasons. The first one as a gender balance, because I am here the only man between great women. So thank you so much for bringing me here. The second thing, I think I will speak about EPD International, which is a part of IVL, Swedish Research Institute. Actually, EPD is basically a product or a report that shows the environmental impact of any product or service. So it is not only global warming potential, because global warming potential is one impact, but we have in our region, in the global south, the water, we are water-stressed countries, so we need to check water footprint. We need to see land use. We need to consider acidification and eutrophication and other impacts of the products. Also, when we start, EPD can assess every part of the building. So it can be used as a tool for architects to bring the emissions of the building to the lowest. So we assess the environmental impact, global warming potential, and others for materials, for electricity, for air conditions, for every product that is used in the system. And actually, since the movement or since the change in the lead requirements, we are now in our best position, as I will show you in a moment. So EPD International is a Swedish institute, but it is global in nature. As we can see here, we are in almost all over the world. Only the global south, we only have South Africa and a few countries in Asia. And then we now have EPD MENA, which I am managing director of the region. So actually, one of the problems here is that the capacity building of people here is very much needed, because it is new, actually. Since the change of the lead requirements, people started to ask, what is EPD? How we will do it? How we will produce it? So we needed to move to EPD MENA to consider this one. So EPD International is a proud inventor of EPDs and PCRs. So what is EPD is Environmental Product Declaration. PCRs is Product Category Rules. What is Product Category Rules? Actually, every product, if it is food, it has environmental impact, different from those for construction, different from those for textile, from whatever. So for each category of materials, we have in EPD International a cookbook of how to produce, how to develop life cycle assessment, which is ISO-based methodology. And then through our verifiers, our approved verifiers, we have a third-party verification. So we produce an EPD, Environmental Product Declaration, with ISO-based methodology and third-party verification, which is type 3 declaration, you say, because it is built on research. So those are some of our partners in the world. And of course, these are actually in this region because we are now in UAE. So those are all from the branches or the franchise of the multinational countries, multinational companies that are working in the region. So now with a study that is made based on scientific methodologies, we can make an informed decisions. We can compare materials. We can benchmark materials. We can select materials based on whatever we want. If we are water-stressed country, maybe we can select the product that uses less water, not only climate change. So we will have another dimension to consider through using the EPD. So informed decision-making is one of the main ideas of using EPD, and that's why I think, from my point of view, that LEED used EPD and give 1.5 points to when you submit 20 EPDs. So, and this was actually reflected in our work, as I said in the beginning. These are the number of published EPDs since we started in 1990 something. So until 2015, we were like in the 400. Last year, we published 1,200. This year, before the year ends, we now reach 2,500, which is, and we are expected to double next year. This is only because of one regulation considered by LEED. So it is possible to build informed decisions, but with the intervention of other regulators and other institutions like yourself in considering EPD. Actually, EPD in principle has 5 steps. The first step, as I said, we have a product category rule. So what category? Is it electrical? For example, if it is electrical device, then we have product category rule of how to perform or how to issue an EPD for this. So for air conditions, for forestry materials, for whatever materials, we first select the product category rule, then do life cycle assessment, which is according to ISO 144 and 40 and 144, and then compile the life cycle assessment study. Actually, the intelligence of EPD is that when we do LCA, it is you have to share sensitive materials, sensitive inputs. You have to share all energy inputs, all material inputs, all hazardous waste, non-hazardous waste. So nobody will has the wish to show his industry for public. So it was like build the life cycle assessment, do the study, and then take the results, compile them into an EPD document, and then it goes to an independent verifier, external and independent verifier. So it is not from the same company, and then it is published. So this is, in short, how EPD is developed. I just put here some links for our library of EPDs, our library of PCR. As I said, we have more than 110 PCRs for different products, list of approved individual verifiers, and actually there is material pyramid that was developed by a Danish institution that used the results of EPD. This is the last link here. Please try it. and I'm ready to answer all of your questions in my email here. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to turn now to Ginger Scoggins, who is a fellow of ASHRAE, which is, in case anyone doesn't know, the American Society for Heating, Refrigerating and Air Conditioning Engineers. And Ginger is the 2023 to 24 president. So, Ginger, take it away.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Smith. Is this on? Can you hear me? Yes, okay. All right, great. I want to start by thanking everyone for this opportunity to be in this discussion. I liked Emily's comments about left brain, right brain. I know engineers are usually in our left brain. We could use a little more right brain thinking. So on behalf of ASHRAE's 53,000 members from more than 130 countries dedicated to advancing the arts and sciences of heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and refrigeration, I am delighted and honored to be here today. So ASHRAE, let me get to that. ASHRAE is comprised of building engineers, we have architects, scientists, educators, and building systems professionals focused on improving building design and operation and advancing HVAC and R technologies and applications. We are committed to sustainability and understand the importance of decarbonizing the built environment. This year, ASHRAE Society theme is Challenge Accepted, Tackling the Climate Crisis. So we are all in on discussions on climate change. We're focusing on integrated solutions to address the effects of the climate crisis through meaningful building decarbonization strategies. Today, I will share with you some of the ways ASHRAE is addressing the challenges that our industry faces as a result of the global climate crisis. The ASHRAE Task Force for Building Decarbonization, which was formed about 3.5, maybe 4 years ago, is comprised of over 100 expert volunteers from around the world. 5 members of this task force leadership in this photo are participating in COP28, either in person or virtually. Our task force members have helped to author books and standards on decarbonization, and we just hosted a sold-out building decarbonization conference this past October in Washington, D.C. with several partners, industry partners, as well as we are planning a new ASHRAE International Conference on Building Decarbonization this coming April in Madrid, Spain, and an existing tall buildings decarbonization conference in New York in October of 2024. Our task force has laid out a roadmap for our industry to follow through the development of what will be 7 guides, along with how-to videos providing practical information and applications for our members to understand how to design new and renovate existing buildings to reduce or eliminate carbon emissions. Additional decarbonization resources include, we have an ASHRAE position document on building decarbonization that is well written and is on our website. And we have an ASHRAE decarbonization toolbox. Our goal is to get this information out to our members so they know how to design and renovate existing and new buildings. We also offer an online course titled Decarbonizing in the Built Environment, as well as a wealth of other invaluable technical guidance on ASHRAE's Building Decarbonization resource page, which is ashrae.org/decarb. We are retooling the focus of our existing energy standards to address embodied as well as operational carbon. Operational carbon has been addressed by ASHRAE since 1975 when we released our first version of ASHRAE Standard 90.1. And we are driving that standard down every 3 years when it's released to reduce the amount of energy that buildings consume. ASHRAE is building on Standard 90.1 to create an additional new, streamlined, flexible building standard framework to help countries in the global south develop their own consensus-based building codes with the target of achieving zero carbon-ready emissions in new buildings by 2030. ASHRAE will also incorporate a more extensive decarbonization focus in our Standard 100, which is energy efficiency in existing buildings. and address the greenhouse gas emissions of refrigerants in standards 15 and 34. At our heart, we are a standards writing organization. As was stated previously, I think what we need is those standards to be adopted by codes. We have also developed 2 new standards addressing carbon and energy. Standard 228 was recently released this year and provides a standard method of evaluating zero net energy and zero net carbon building performance. And Standard 240P, which is evaluating, and the P stands for preliminary, evaluating greenhouse gas and carbon emissions in building design, construction, and operations, is currently in development and will provide a methodology to assess greenhouse gas emissions associated with buildings over their life cycle. We are partnering with the International Code Council on this standard, and it went from conception to the first public review in just 4 months, which, if you know anything about ASHRAE, that's a record, which shows what we can do when we need to move fast. So decarbonizing the built environment will require an incredibly broad array of actions, and we are encouraging our members and industry professionals to educate themselves and accept the challenge of passing their knowledge along to others. Thank you for allowing me to share some of ASHRAE's building decarbonization goals and strategies.
Thank you so much, Ginger. And now, last but very much not least, at the other end of the table, I'd love to introduce Dr. Valerie Vaughan Dick from the Royal Institute of British Architects.
Thank you, Smith. I'll say a bit about RIBA, and then I'll talk about the presentation and the question at hand. The Royal Institute of British Architects has 57,000 members, with 8,000 based outside of the UK. And at the RIBA, we promote the highest professional standards and support individual architects and architecture practices across the globe, and that is a very important objective for us. We are a registered charity, we've got a Royal Charter, and utmost in our objectives is to work to deliver safer and equitable buildings and a sustainable environment. So listening, and I've listened closely to the presentations today, they have demonstrated in different ways how the whole built environment must come together if we're going to reach net zero and if we're going to decarbonize our building stock. And I just want to touch very briefly on some of the collaborative work that the RIBA has been focusing on in recent years on sustainability and doing something to build a greener environment. So, in 2019, we launched what's termed the 2030 Climate Challenge. And this was in response to the climate emergency that we are all aware of. We invited architects and the wider industry to shift towards an outcomes-based performance target. And this, we felt, would radically transform the built environment. There is a challenge here, and that's why it's titled the Climate Challenge, because this challenge focuses on targets to reduce operational energy, embodied carbon, and potable water. And by architectural practices joining this initiative, we felt that collectively we can do something to reduce the climate challenge impact of the constructed building itself, including materials, also products and the maintenance of these over its lifetime. So this particular challenge was really, really important about reducing the impact of climate change. We've also, over the last 2 years, we produced a series of sustainability guidance documents, really important for individuals throughout our membership and externally to be able to look at good quality information. RIBA's plan of work on all of these areas dates back to 1963, so this isn't something that we've suddenly just thought about, but it was designed to provide a framework for architects so that it can bring clarity to each stage of a project. It has evolved over the number of years to these guidance to reflect changing trends, and we feel, and the feedback we've got, it's now an industry-wide tool. In 2020, we revised the plan of work, and this was to encourage consideration of sustainable design at each stage of a development. In 2015, we, as an organisation, signed up to the UN Global Compact, and this is really important because it was a part of our commitment to sustainability as well as professionalism. So, RIBA being a signatory, we said a number of things, but key to that is that we are committed to supporting the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are to ensure projects are aligned with the SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals, and so we have produced the Sustainable Outcome Guide. And we've also created the Plan for Use Guide, and this sets out actions to deliver a sustainable built environment based on evidence, data and lessons learned. And the feedback we got was that, yes, there's lots of guides telling you what to do, but sometimes we, as a profession, need to understand that sometimes things work, sometimes things could get better. And so those lessons learned, we've made sure we've collated and shared with our members, but also those who want to access those guides. So, you've listened to me and heard today from other members of the panel that we cannot do anything about achieving net zero, about meeting those sustainability development goals, or reducing carbon emissions if we do not do cross-sector collaboration. And architects cannot do anything, what I've talked about, on their own. The entire sector must work together, not just to upskill itself, but to scale up its capabilities. I think that we in RIBA recognise that the built environment is a system, and the transition to a fair and sustainable built environment can only be brought about through collaborative and strategic system-wide analysis and action. In the UK, we are working together to deliver tools to help us reach our decarbonisation goals. And I'd like to share two vital pieces of work. The first is the Built Environment Carbon Database. Now, the Built Environment Carbon Database, this is a free-to-access software, and it pulls together a swathe of industry carbon data into one single location and functions as the main UK platform to store new carbon assessments and generate projects. Its product-level benchmarks on things such as the environmental product declarations. And a number of organisations have signed up and are using this tool. But in return for benchmarking information and calculations, users need to upload project information. Without new information, more information and growth, we're not going to learn and not going to be able to disseminate the learnings that we have collated. So a key driver behind the platform's development is inconsistency in the measurement and reporting of whole life carbon emissions and underlying data needed to benchmark construction performance and set targets. And this, we have found, is one of the biggest challenges. And I think throughout this COP and different meetings I've had, the whole issue about data is central to what everyone is talking as a challenge. Secondly, we are also a member of the steering group for the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard. This was founded with the principle of collaboration by 9 leading organisations from across the built environment. And the initiative is our purpose is about net zero. It's not about being profit driven. The ambition of the initiative is to respond to the industry need to bring clarity by agreeing a single source methodology and definition to what constitutes a net zero carbon building. And I must emphasise, this initiative is about the UK. And this is in line with the 1.5 degree warming scenario. So we're working collaboratively to learn and to do something to make sure that we meet this objective. I should add, it is a standard that focuses solely on whole life carbon, and it brings clarity to the UK industry on what is required at the asset level to be in line with climate science. The standard is for anyone who wants to either fund, who wants to procure, design, or specify a net zero carbon building, and anyone wanting to demonstrate that their building is net zero and it's aligned with an industry agreed standard. Really, really important. So these 2 projects that I've talked about, core to them is that they're in collaboration, not with just a group of architects, but they're in collaboration with surveyors, engineers and builders. And they show that the built environment sector is leading the change in delivering truly net zero buildings. So, collaboration, really, really important. We've got an urgency, and I think many people in the whole world understand that there's an urgency with what needs to be done. But I've shown you, and I think I've heard, that the industry is leading the way in this space, but I think from my perspective, government across the world are lagging behind. Despite huge potential for reducing global carbon emission, there is currently a lack of specific mitigation policies for the built environment. In many parts of the world, building codes do not even exist at all. And where they do exist, significant emission sources are often omitted, such as there's no measurement, no collation, no recognition of embodied carbon. So as the electricity and gas grid continues to decarbonize, there is a hidden measure that is not looking and addressing this, and that's the embodied carbon emissions of most new buildings created between now and 2050. If this continues, they will have emissions greater than those emissions released through energy use during the building's lifetime. And I think this is now what people are starting to recognise. So, yep, people have recognised this, but embodied carbon is almost entirely still unregulated. Because currently regulation focuses mostly, exclusively, on the energy use of new buildings with no attempt to regulate the building's actual energy use. It's imperative that this changes. Governments have a role to play in setting standards to raise the bars for buildings. As an organisation, we're going to continue to work with the whole built environment to influence governments across the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you to everybody for sharing your thoughts there. As you can see, we've got a real kind of breadth across the built environment system, as beautifully put by Valerie there, represented on this panel. So I'd love to get into it with you all now. We've got a little bit of time to have some questions, and we can also take questions from the audience in a moment as well. Emily, you've been waiting patiently, so I'll come to you first if that's all right. But actually pick up on something that Valerie was just talking about, which is around regulation. And obviously regulation is sort of more and less present in different parts of the world, and embodied carbon is sort of very little regulated. So I was wondering, from your perspective and from in terms of the role of the architect, what can architects do to sort of really implement those good design solutions, perhaps the use of timber where the regulations aren't in place and it's not sort of mandated?
Well, one of the things that we've done with the American Institute of Architects, and our membership is voluntary, so not every architect needs to be part of our organization, but obviously there's a lot of value and benefits to that, is to put into our ethics that you must have a conversation about sustainability, and we can argue, we could be a little tougher and also say a conversation about carbon with every project that you do. Does that happen? No, but that is our goal, because we no longer have the option to think about things on a short term. Buildings often last beyond one's lifetime or job or profession, and thinking about the decisions that we make today have great impact in the future. So I think building codes and regulations, while many might see them as an impediment, I think they're critical to us moving forward. And the conversation is less of being reactionary and more proactive, and talking about this with our elected officials, with those who create policy, to be in those conversations. And in some cases, educating people to the why.
You spoke about the AIA framework for design excellence, and I really appreciated the health, safety and welfare of people as being central, and of course we're here at the COP with the very first health day, so I wonder if you could talk a bit about the importance of that holistic definition of good design and how that relates to health as well.
Yeah, I think for too long we thought that a good building was one that conformed to often a Western style design of beauty, right? And not always thinking about the function or the quality of the space that it was in. And I think one of the things that I love about the framework for design excellence is that it's a guide, and it's a new definition of what design is that really takes into account not just the aesthetic side of things, but how things function. Does it fit with ergonomics? It takes into account water, which I think is going to be a huge crisis point. It is in the global south, and I think the global north is is in a land of abundance. But it's a critical conversation. I think changing the idea that we can no longer design for just one aspect, that we really need to look holistically at things. And my favorite one is design for delight, because that reminds me that we should enjoy the buildings that we're in. And part of the magic of being an architect is really lifting people up. We always have a choice. You can do good or you can do not good. And I choose to do good.
I love that. Thank you. Natasha, just picking up on the Health Day theme as well, of course, maybe you could say a bit more about the role of forestry and sustainably managed forest in tackling the climate, biodiversity and social kind of crises altogether.
Sure, and I think it is really critically important that globally, collectively, and those decision makers in particular start to understand where these products come from and the impact that they have on livelihoods, well-being, and being able to decarbonise that built environment. There is also that biophilic design as well, bringing nature back in to connect people with that. And so from our perspective, as an association that looks after the whole supply chain of forestry and forest products, and I think it is that holistic narrative that needs to come in to the conversation, no matter what conversation you're having. No longer can we just think about a product or a building or what have you as a linear, but it is actually that circular design, and that, when we think about nature-based solutions, and there's a lot of talk about nature-based solutions providing solutions for the climate crisis, but what does that look like in real terms? So I do think that there does need to be some deeper thinking about where the products are coming from and how do we look after the current forests we have, in addition to being able to work with landholders to increase that forest supply. So, all trees are good trees and some trees are production trees, and I think that we're currently working not only just with the broader and our bigger members, but also farm forestry as well, allowing landholders to have that biodiversity and I guess diversity of income as well, when we think about certainly the benefits of trees on farm around shelter belts, shade, biodiversity. A lot of farmers in Australia, sadly, do one type of farming, but I think it is a bit like a building. You have to think about the whole landscape, and so, trees on farm have got multiple purposes, and trees in our environment have multiple purposes, even in, in our cities, greening those areas as well. So, but having healthy trees in a changing climate, no matter where these trees are, it's going to become more challenging, and we need to start thinking more deeply about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to take the segue there as well, because we at UKGBC have been doing some work on embodied ecological impact. So thinking about not just the embodied carbon, but also embodied water, embodied biodiversity impacts and so on. And it's really, really clearly coming up that we need to think more holistically. And I think that's where that kind of right brain thinking comes in as well. Like, we need to think about how all of these things are interconnected, and find solutions that can address those things together. Just while I have you, Natasha, I was wondering if you could say anything about sort of sustainable forestry certifications, and also perhaps the impact of the European Union deforestation regulation and what that might be having on timber supply.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it is important to know that sustainable forestry is a certified forestry as well, and but not all forests are certified. So I think that's something that as global leaders, they can start thinking a little bit more deeply about as well. And when we talk about deforestation, often people don't really understand what that is. So sustainable forestry is not deforestation. That is, that cycle of harvesting and replanting a landscape. And you've got different types of forestry, from farm forestry to plantation forestry to natural forestry. So I think there are different types of forestry in different jurisdictions, which is what we took to COP last year. Is really, right now it feels like a black and white conversation. Either you support one type of forestry and you don't support another, and we're finding that challenge in Australia. But certainly Australia does not have deforestation, and we often find ourselves having to justify or to promote what we do in Australia through those lenses. But it is, I guess, all actors, I'm going to call them all actors, have a role to play in ensuring that we have a very balanced conversation and we allow that conversation to actually happen. Because right now, sometimes the conversation gets cut short because people want to stick with their ideology or their thinking, and it goes to this holistic thinking, broaden the debate, because we don't have a long time to go. I mean, we keep having these conversations at COP, and I know for the ag sector, when I'm looking at the discussions happening over there, there is a lot of frustration for farmers right now, and I know I've got Dr. Sue Ogilvie in the crowd right now. There is a lot of frustration with farmers right now about what their role will be in the impact on nature as well, and how they can be part of this conversation. So I think we need to allow a broader range of voices, and just a lot more deeper thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the privileges of being here at COP is being able to really see and attend events from different sectors and be able to draw those parallels, because a lot of the challenges that we're facing are sort of shared and in common. And so thinking about things like the accessibility of actually achieving certification, for example, is something that affects lots of different sectors in different ways. Now, NASA, of course, central to certification, and being able to draw the link between the producers and manufacturers and those making the design decisions are EPDs. They're playing this kind of crucial linking role. So could you say something maybe a bit about what governments could do to increase the importance of EPDs and those kind of embodied carbon considerations?
Yeah, I think I will start with government need to step up, as Dr. Valerie said. So it is government. Do you need an example? CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So when European Union started to regulate the export and import of 6 materials. Now in everywhere, in every country who is exporting to European Union, they have to calculate embodied carbon for a simple and complex material, the embodied carbon, embodied energy. Yeah, we can extend to EPD. Then they have to start with regulation. So this is the role of the governments. The role of government is to regulate. So regulation by adapting CBAM, adapting SBTI, science-based target, because actually one of the issues is that every government has its own motivation, its own targets. So we don't come together. But if we can put our effort together, then we can do this. So first starting with regulations that mandate the calculation of embodied carbon and embodied water, whatever important, adapting, as I said, net zero strategies, arranging education and capacity building for the professionals who are working in the field. Actually, this is one hinder, because we were working with the Commercial Law Department program of United States, GIZ, EBRD, Ministry of Finance in Egypt, to set a sustainable public procurement plans for Egypt, my home country. So the issue is that the people who are there to do the strategies, they need to be educated to know why we need to calculate carbon footprint, embodied carbon, and whatever thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks again for picking up on that integrated. It's not just about embodied carbon, but embodied energy. You also mentioned water. Water footprinting is, again, enormous. There's a lot more to EPDs than just embodied carbon. I know that's why they've become famous, but thank you for championing that. And again, the role of government procurement as well. It's not only the role of governments to kind of regulate, but also can lead by example. Yeah. Ginger, talking of people playing to their own rules, your global headquarters, you've obviously had to sort of, through that huge project, you've sort of needed to implement some of your own guidelines and systems and so on. Could you say a little bit more about how that was sort of road testing your own work? Sure. Oh, sorry.
You're welcome to speak to it if you like.
Give it a go.
Yeah, so we really took on a big challenge. We took a 1970s era building that was if I can say gently, a dog of a building, and we were determined to change it into a net zero building so that we could really show the industry that it's possible. Because by 2060, 2070, most of the buildings in use are already built. So renovating saves so much more carbon than building new. And building new, as a design engineer, is easy to follow the new rules for decarbonization. It's renovations that are the challenge. So we had, as you can imagine, we had many of our own guidelines that are in place now, our own standards we had to obviously use for our renovation, or we were not going to hear the end of it from our members. So standard 90.1, which is our energy efficiency standard, we found that the building we bought did not meet the envelope requirements for 90.1 when it was built, much less our new ones today. So 90.1, 62, indoor air quality, refrigerant standards of 15 and 34, our design guides for zero energy for low energy buildings. So, you know, we did this right before the whole explosion discussion on decarbonization, but we did discuss the fact that we did not need to use fossil fuels in our building. So we had a big gas generator when we bought it. We got rid of that. We got rid of all the gas appliances in the building. So there were a lot of standards that we had to follow just to meet the requirements of what our members were expecting. much less what we could show the industry what we were doing. So we did end up with a net zero energy building, and it was a great learning tool. That is, the information, our dashboard and all is shortly to be available online for people to see how much we're producing in solar and then how much we're consuming.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Right, I'm going to ask Valerie a question and then it's over to you guys. Actually, I just want to pick up on something that Ginger mentioned there, which was around existing buildings and the importance of retrofitting existing buildings. In the UK, 80% of the buildings that we need for 2050 are already built, but globally that figure's more like 50%. So we really need to think about where we're building internationally. And I was wondering, Valerie, as it is Education Day today as well, and obviously the RIBA is an international institution, what is the role for kind of knowledge and skills exchange internationally and making sure that we're sort of holistically thinking about the overall sustainability of the built environment?
Thank you for that, Smith. I think I like the word exchange because there is sometimes a perception that organisations in the global north should just be telling organisations and individuals in the global south how to do things, and that's not RIBA's way. So we, thank you, we can learn from others as so others can learn from us. And we've got quite an interesting initiative that was started earlier this year. I started in the job as Chief Executive in January of this year, and there was something that was being discussed, and a group of us gripped it by the horn and pushed it and made it a reality. And that was, there were a number of members of the Commonwealth Association of Architects, and those who don't know the Commonwealth, it was the old empire for the UK, and a number of us, and it was 4 initially, we said we've got to do something to share knowledge. If we do not do this, knowledge and skills, then we are not going to, as a world, address the issues that we've been talking about today, net zero, you know, reducing the use of carbon, emissions, etc. So 3 of us started, and then we reached out, and very quickly 10 members of the Commonwealth Association of Architects signed a memorandum of understanding, and this was a landmark agreement, because this agreement was saying we, as a group of individuals and countries, we're going to enable vital knowledge and expertise to be shared between us. And we've got a lot of resources compared to some of the other countries, but we are learning from those countries and they're learning from us. The key thing here is that we're going to be able to not just share vital knowledge and expertise, but we're going to start to develop capacity in certain countries in policy and legislation. It's not just us, but there's other organisations in Canada, in Australia, who are a part of this agreement. We're going to do learning and development. We're going to look at urban planning and design and increase professional skills and climate literacy in sustainable urbanisation and climate action. It covers 5 continents of this world, and even though some countries are not a part of the Commonwealth, they are learning from organisations who are a signatory to this agreement, so it is spreading. We will use that Commonwealth network, which is really important, on looking first at supporting urgently those countries facing the most immediate challenges. So we're not sitting back and thinking, help us. We are learning, but there are some countries who are at a zero base and really need input, and so we prioritised on that basis. And another thing is that it's not a stale type of working. It's very dynamic, it's very much alive and looking at what is needed around the world today to achieve this goal that everybody should really be thinking we've got to do something here. So I'm really proud that I was at the very, very beginning consulting and working collaboratively with a number, just a very few, it was only 4 of us, and I can't remember whose time zone was out of kilter with my time zone, but it was 5 o'clock in the morning for some of us, and sometimes we were at 11 o'clock at night for others. But that showed our commitment to get this agreement over the line and recognise that, yes, we're all facing challenges, but some of those countries are facing a challenge that we've already been through, so we're learning. So yes, we have got a role, but I liked what you asked a question. It's not for us to say this is what you do. It's an exchange and do it in a dynamic way. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Sounds like an incredible example of international collaboration of the sort we need all around us right now more than ever. Right, what I'm going to do is, because we don't have so much time left, is I'm going to see if there are any questions, and then what we'll do is we'll just take 3 or 4 questions, if there are 3 or 4 questions, and then I'll come to each of you for a final remark, and just as part of that, if you could just pick up on anything that sparks your interest, if that's all right. So, questions. Is this the mic, or is... No, okay. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So we'll come to you.
Thank you. Hello, Ashley Bates and Horley. Thanks for the fascinating contributions. The stat given earlier that we're going to double global floor areas in 30 years or so is frightening. How do we make sure that it isn't a replication of Western-style carbon-intensive buildings? So there's a lot that could be learned. What should practitioners and policymakers do more to avoid doubling of greenhouse gas emissions? Thanks.
Thanks very much. There was another question over it. Okay, we'll just have the mic going that way. But come to you next. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a perfect panel. But unfortunately, I'm not from the architect. I'm from the oil and gas industries. But I'm very interested to learn a lot from your panel. So my question is, by the net zero, time-wise, because we talk so much. So I'd like to know, for this architect, for the net zero, what is the time schedule for that? Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Person in the stripy T-shirt.
Thank you, everyone, for your contribution. I see that there is also a variety of audience. I'm from the civil society. And there was a great discussion around sustainability standards. So my question would be around standards. And I'm wondering if together with sustainability standards, you also consider accessibility standards. I mean, accessibility for the built environment, physical accessibility for persons with disabilities. Because what we see in Europe is now that many buildings need to be renovated. It's much better that accessibility, physical accessibility, is included from the beginning in the design of the built environment, rather than including it later, also considering like health reasons, many people getting older and older. I'm from European experience, but I'm wondering if, for example, ISO accessibility standards, you take it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the person next to you, I think, was also, and then spots at the back.
Hi, my name is Caesar. I'm from Botswana. I'm an architect. I trained in the UK, a RIBA member. Hi, Valerie. I think the text around, then the publications around green building and sustainability have been around for the longest of time. Even when I was a student in the UK in 1998. You see, the uptake on transformation and the built environment is what derails things to take off. I think it was an issue around climate change that now every sector is now trying to rush and do things, all these type of things. But the pioneers around green buildings have already set the tone, and there was no uptake. And but that's neither here nor there now. But the issue is now to move forward. I know in the UK you've already alluded that 50% of you've already come to by 2050 already built up. But I'm from Africa. We still have got a lot of building stock to go forward. I say what we need in Botswana is maybe a collaboration between AIA, RIBA, whoever comes on board, to develop the standards going forward, because that's where we need in terms of technical support and assistance. because in the next building stocks of what we need to do, because what we have in Botswana and in Africa in general is that urbanization, migration of rural to urban is becoming a huge problem because of the economic opportunities that happen in the cities. So we need to see what kind of cities are we going to develop going to the future. And governments are developing cities. I mean, you look at the uptake of the urban regeneration in Egypt and other countries, and everybody's now building new cities, and they are building smart cities. So what Africa really needs, especially for my country, is we need technical assistance in developing standards. And then once we do that, the infusion of standards into our building industries will be much easier, because we are susceptible to any assistance that we might get. So that's what I'm saying. I'm here not to say we don't want to subscribe to net zero, but we say we are here to look for technical assistance. I think we'll need to talk to Valeria about that, and we need to talk to Emily about issues about how do you assist emerging developing economies, because we need to get it right. I know obviously the Western world, you're already developing, are now going towards retrofitting, but for us, we're going to need to redevelop new cities going forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, very briefly, person in the spotty at the back.
Sarah Bray from the Australian Forest Products Association. Just a question for Dr. Nasser. What will an EPD look like in 5 to 10 years? Will EPDs exist, and how might they evolve?
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. So we have questions on how we make sure that we don't replicate Western styles in terms of building design. What is the timescale for net zero within buildings and architecture? How do we integrate accessibility with sustainability? How can we foster international collaboration to support the uptake of those sustainability standards? And what will an EPD look like in 5 years? So as you give your final remarks, just 1 minute-ish each, just tackle any of those that you want, and hopefully we'll cover the ball between us. Thanks very much for your questions.
This is kind of like the speed round.
Yeah.
Should I just jump in?
Just go.
Okay. I'm going to take 4 out of 6.
We'll go down the paddle.
Okay. That's a fascinating question. How do we design something that doesn't replicate what we've already had, that doesn't fit? And I think part of this conversation is that's a huge role for architects, to have a programming conversation with their clients so that we're not just replicating what's been done before, but it's the right size. And something that I feel very personally about is ensuring that we're having the conversation of how do I as an individual change my behavior so I'm not using as much energy. And that's so change management with users. And so I love your question. I don't have a great answer for you, but it's something that's going to sit with me for a while. In terms of the timeline, we've got to do it soon. And I know that's not a popular thing for someone in the oil and gas industry to hear, but we need to do it sooner rather than later, because we know that we're going to miss the mark if we don't act on it. Accessibility, incredibly important. This was a topic specifically on net zero buildings, which is why we didn't talk about accessibility. But just like there's many chapters in architecture, that's a huge one that we need to touch upon. And to the gentleman that was talking about standards, especially in Africa, there's a quote that really sits with me from an indigenous architect in the US who says, "Don't design for us without us." And I think that the technical standards are important, but for Africa, African architects have to be part of the conversation, and it has to be authentic to your culture.
Okay. Well done. Thank you very much, Natasha.
Thank you. And I'm going to keep it fairly high level in the sense that, we would always say that in the current environment, there is a known technology, and that's called photosynthesis, and it stores carbon in a beautiful tree, and you can transfer that carbon into the built environment, which we saw with the T3 building and other beautiful timber buildings around the country, around the world as well. So we think that from AFA's point of view, we've been doing a lot of work internationally as well around all governments, countries, really be private industry, investors and civil society need to think about where do they put that vote? How do they make those policies to actually increase sustainable forestry, make sure that we do protect the current forests, the pressure that will come on nature to solve a lot of our carbon decarbonisation issues moving forward is immense, and I think we still are not having that conversation, but we need to have it in parallel or in conjunction holistically with those who actually build the buildings, buy the buildings, make the buildings, and want to live in these buildings. And I think that all of us have got the ability to influence change and to make that change more rapid, because, as you said, we don't have a lot of time. I mean, we keep talking about net zero by 2050, and 2050 is really just a blink of an eye. And for our sector, even if we were to plant all the trees that we need for the future today, it will take 30, 40, 50, 70 years for these trees to grow to be able to put them into that built environment. So it is really critical, and we need to be thinking a lot smarter and actually driving that investment into those forests and that sustainable forest management now.
Thank you very much.
So for EPDs in future, we have to answer the question in two parts. If we will have support from governments and from everybody or not. So if we will have the support, I think, it will be great. But if not, it will take some time to develop, because we are seeing it now. So basically, what we do in EPD International is that we are creating a digital databases for environmental performance of products. So it is now used by other organizations to do comparative, to compare between products. The link I made, it's called material pyramid. So you can just compare and do. So compare means data, if the data is there, then it will be easy for us. Actually, one of the issues in Africa and in the global south in general, that we don't have data. So basically, we rely on the databases. So yes, it is until now, it is difficult. It is moving very slowly, but I think in 10 years from now, we will be like Europe now in EPD. So we are maybe delayed 10 years than the situation, because I'm involved in training, in capacity building, in everything related to EPDs for databases. Still, there are much to do, but we need the government to step up, to other organizations to step up, and then we will be in a good shape. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ginger.
Sure. So I'll address two things. One is, how do we not design buildings like we have for the West? We should not at this point be designing buildings that use fossil fuels, period. Right? I mean, unless you have a reason, like you have an electric grid that cannot sustain electric usage, then we should not be saddling an owner with a building today that uses fossil fuels 40, 50 years in the future. That, to me, is a very simple discussion. We should also be designing buildings that are energy efficient first, passive before active. That way I can downsize mechanical system and use less energy through the life of the building. So to me, that's the way to go there for buildings of the future. As far as for Africa, ASHRAE has 90.1 standard, which is our energy efficiency in existing buildings. We are working on a new, if you want to call it a 90.1 light for developing economies, that is a little less intensive. We have a tendency to make things complicated. I know that surprises everybody, but we're looking at something that's going to be a little bit easier for developing economies to adopt on a consensus basis for a standard that can become a code in terms of the energy efficient requirements for buildings. So that goes to the envelope, it goes to the systems, the lighting, everything in it is in 90.1. It is adopted by the United States as the National Energy Code, and several other countries across the world. So we're looking at something a little bit less intense, that for countries that are just developing, that may not want to go all in on a 90.1 standard for code adoption. And that's something that we're working on right now. So.
Thank you so much. Valerie.
I'm conscious of the time, so I'll just talk about two things which haven't been picked up by me or sometimes some of the others. So firstly, I think that when we're talking about reaching net zero, people just say, yeah, got to reach net zero, and I know how that's defined. But what we're doing at RIBA is we want to improve the competence of our members to be able to do that. And so UK chartered members will need to demonstrate their ability to design buildings that deliver sustainable outcomes and meet our 2030 climate challenge that was in my presentation. And this is going to be through a climate literacy test. It will cover a broad range of subjects. I won't go through it now, but this test will be quite detailed compared to current industry standards, and it will enable architects to be fluent with specialist engineers and consultants. And as a part of the membership, in time, you will have to pass that climate literacy test to remain as part of RIBA. And I think that's really important to say that this is now going to be really, really central. So that's the first thing. The second thing, a colleague from Botswana, you raised a question about Africa. If you are a part of the human race like me, and we are there and we do support our members, every single member, no matter what country. If you've got an issue, just write in and I will be able to say how we can work with you to develop standards. We're doing it with others. I don't see why we wouldn't do it with you. So just contact us. That does happen. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, on that moment of real life international collaboration, thank you so much. Emily, Natasha, Nasser, Ginger and Valerie, and thank you everybody for coming and everybody who's online. Good evening.